flipped into seeming like a treadmill on which they would never get anywhere. Julian eventually left both the band and his partner and, much to the surprise of his friends, enrolled in a master's degree in business management. Julian, the rock and roller, in a business suit? Julian would have none of it. Business is really interesting. It's about people, about how they interact. In fact, it's creative. It's a way of bringing about new relationships and better ways of living. Needless to say, that didn't last. By the time of graduation, Julian could only see the entrapment of 30 years of 9-to-5 working in an office ahead of him. This time he became really depressed and saw both a doctor who prescribed antidepressants and a counselor who introduced him to some of the more New Age elements of psychotherapy. For a while, he made his living with his then-girlfriend doing Reiki, psychodrama, and Indian head massage, the two of them living frugally but healthily in a large rambling farmhouse in a remote spot. They didn't need foreign holidays, so vivifying and healthy was the way they lived all year round. That lasted 3 years, until a rift with his partner and disillusion with the therapies he was practicing led Julian into his glummest spirits yet. He resolved to travel the world for a year, to revitalize himself, and, through a series of chance encounters, ended up writing features for the travel magazine. He loves his job. He's been doing it for a year and has a fabulous French girlfriend who is a photographer. Clearly, traveling and travel writing is what he has always been working towards. Their lives are so different, Lee and Julian, and yet they are the same age and sex. We can easily imagine them both coming from fairly normal middle-class backgrounds, being of similar intelligence and educational attainment, and having been exposed to broadly similar cultural expectations and values. In fact, it is no stretch of the imagination, given our experience of human beings, to imagine two people having essentially the same set of experiences growing up, and yet having adult lives at least as different from each other as those of Lee and Julian. If the initial social conditions were so similar, then what could possibly account for two human lives coming out so differently? Non-psychologists I talk to have strong intuitions about this question. What brings about the different outcomes is, they say, the different personalities or temperaments or characters of the two individuals involved. What is personality, I ask? They tell me that it is something internal, stable, inherent to the person, something which stands in a causal relationship to their specific choices, motivations, reactions, and obstacles when faced with the stream of events. A clue to personality being at work, they tell me, is a kind of thematic recurrence within the events of a life. For example, over the course of a few years, Lee eventually ends up hostile about most of the people he has to work with. In the same way, he is quite likely to end up being hostile about someone he has to sit next to on a train journey or flight. The timescale is quite different, and the stakes and demands of the interaction are very different. But the fact that, sooner or later, another person in close proximity is likely to do something to annoy him recurs as a leitmotif across Lee's life. A leitmotif, I suspect, Lee will never consider, since he finds psychologists and psychology books really annoying. Similarly for Julian, there are a number of recurring patterns. Each of the domains of fusion music, psychodrama, self-sufficient farm living, and travel writing is unusual and creative, but Julian has been drawn to them all within a short life. It is as if there is a constant quest for new ways of experiencing the world and expressing his experience of it. There is also a characteristic pattern to his life choices. He finds a new domain and becomes tremendously, infectiously excited and activated by it. This serves him very well in getting his new projects established. For a while, he simply will not hear of the drawbacks or limitations. Over time, though, these feelings fade, and in place of enthusiasm come doubt and worry about the future. For, despite his energy, Julian can be a very worried and sad person. The pattern that describes Julian's career activities also describes his relationships. These have typically lasted 2 or 3 years and consisted of an initial phase of great passion, during which his family's mild suggestions of unsuitability are just so ridiculous, unintuitive, and superficial, followed by a period of mounting unhappiness, restlessness, and withdrawal, during which his family's resigned attempts to get on with his chosen paramour are resented. How can they not see that she is not what I need? It is the lot of parents to always be in the wrong. This phase is followed by a period of more or less nervy adjustment and recuperation before the next passion takes hold. Can this leitmotif of initial enthusiasm, followed by withdrawal and denial, be detected at any other level? As I imagine him, Julian has dozens of unopened books that he brought home from the bookshop with a triumphant, "Nietzsche is so..."